for joining us today. I hadn't had a chance to address you personally, but this is Cesar Jimenez, and he is the webmaster at Brazosport College. And today he will be presenting on 3 things to increase engagement on your website. So hopefully we'll all learn a lot. I know website is a key focus for a lot of us. So without further ado, Cesar, please take it away.
Sweet. Okay. Well, again, my name is Cesar. I'm a webmaster at Brazosport College. Totally having imposter syndrome right now, so just keep that in mind. I'm just going to be real with you guys. But really excited to go over this presentation. This is actually something that I presented to our departments during our convocation week. Because our departments are required to maintain their own sites. And so it was actually something that we found was really helpful in helping build content. And so I'm really excited to share it with you guys today. So let's see if I can get my screen shared. Give me 1 second, potentially. There we go. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Perfect.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So what we're going to talk about today is 3 things about increasing your web engagement. And so that really starts with a key question. And so that key question is, what do you want students to do on your site, right? We're trying to build intention on what our sites do, right? So we're thinking about the content that we're placing on it, where students are going. So for example, when we think about our writing center, right? They're trying to schedule tutoring services. How are we curating that content to get that student to actually complete whatever form or whatever is needed to actually make an appointment, right? And so it's changing that thought process from just overloading the student with as much information about this department and now focusing it on what is the key goal. And so that really comes down to 2 things. And we're looking at 2 goals to build your content, which is building efficiency. And so how we do that is we want to reduce repetitive requests. So repetitive requests include things like, where do I find this form? Or how do I schedule an appointment? Or anything that the website can really answer that's really simple. And we want to increase our high touch and high value interactions. And so what that means, so we're thinking high touch, that means that a staff member is actually having to answer the question. And then high value means that it's something that the staff member actually has to put in effort to answer, right? And so that's really important because our staff's time, our time is extremely valuable. And so we want to ensure that when we're answering questions, it's not something that is easy and simple because we want the website to do that for us. And the goal is that by the time the student gets to us, we are answering those more complicated in-depth questions, right? So your content falls right in the middle of that. And so there's 3 key priorities that I go over when it comes to writing and building content for the website. So the first one is easy. And so what that means is it easy for the student to find your content, right? Or find what they're trying to do? Um, can they navigate it well? Can they find the piece on your website that they need to click on to fill out a form? That idea. Clear. So clear is looking at, is it conveyed in a way that the student is going to understand what you're trying to say, right? And then encouraged is thinking about what you want the student to do, and is it clear that they need to click this button to complete the form or click this button to schedule an appointment? Is that clear to the student that that's the place that they need to go, right? So in doing that, we're going to go over easy first. And so the way that we start working on building easy content is ensuring that our web pages employ scannable text. And so what that means, it doesn't mean like that you can actually like scan it like a scanner. It means that you can actually go and click through a website. You can navigate it by simply just going through and reading it quickly and finding what you need. So on average, students are probably going to read about 20% of the text that you have on your site. And so it's really critical that what you're putting on the site is quick for the student to find, that they're not having to read through paragraphs of text to find that really key information. So here's an example. A lot of the times, I think that some content can come to us this way, where it's in a bulk, right? And so it's figuring out like what the most important thing. So this paragraph is about parks in Nebraska, right? But when you just scan it, it's really difficult to figure out like exactly what it is. It takes a lot of time, and so how we can reduce that is number one by using bulleted lists. So by pulling out all of the important information and putting it into a bulleted list, reducing the actual paragraph down to 3 lines, it makes it a lot easier to read. It makes it a lot easier for students to find what they're looking for, right? Because if they're looking for something specific, then they can find it within the bullets, right? That's really important in putting those key points out there. So it's not actually about eliminating text, but just thinking about the way that we are providing that text to students. And so something really interesting about that is that once you put it into that bulleted list, it actually improves the usability of the content that you're putting on the site by 47%, which is huge, almost half, right? The other thing that you can do is also by highlighting keywords. And so we do that by using, by bolding content, what typically students you think you're going to be looking for, making that easier to find. If it's like in this case, it's the number of visitors that are visiting these parks each year. You can find it really easily just because it's bolded. It makes it a lot easier for us to pull out of that bulk of text. The other thing is that links also count as highlighted text. It's a point of interest. It helps them connect to something else that you want them to go to. And so it's just keeping those ideas in there. It's like, how can we use what we already have, if it's our content, to make it easier on the eyes for the students to find it on the page. Another thing that's really important is just thinking about using meaningful subheads, right? Um, a lot of the times, at least in the marketing world, when we're thinking about marketing collateral that is being handed out to students as like pamphlets or flyers, what happens is that we want to use a lot of fluffy language, right? On a website, at this point, the student has already decided that they want to do something. They're just figuring out what those next steps are. And so by putting clear subheads on each block of text that you're adding to your site, it makes it easier for the student to find. For instance, like in this example, the TSI-2 exam, right? Number one, it's clear because it's exactly what we would tell students that they need to register for or sign up for, make an appointment for, all of those things. But also, we spell out exactly what that acronym is. And so we're making it easier not only uh, for the student to find, but also if it's being searched for, that we can pull those specific words out. Um, the next thing, again, kind of going back to what I was saying, avoiding exaggerations or corporate marketing, right? So thinking about like explaining to the student exactly what this is going to go to or what we're talking about, and making sure that it's conversational and it's at their level, but it's very straightforward. Again, going back to that example of like a pamphlet or a flyer, we're going to be a lot more fluffy, a lot more excited and trying to get the students interested. And then when they get to the website level, that's where they're just looking for something specific and they want to make sure that what they are clicking on is exactly what they need. And that goes into that encouraged part, right? And so when we avoid exaggerations and when we use clear subheads, we are actually increasing the usability of the content again by 58%. And so it really becomes an important piece when you're thinking about the content on your site is how clear and how much does it make sense when you are searching for something, right? When you're going through a website and you're reading through content and it's a lot of roundabout descriptions that you aren't fully sure. Maybe is this it? Is that it? Once we cut all of that out, we make it very clear and concise and straightforward with our subheads, with our descriptions, with our links. It's going to increase the usability and it's going to make sure that students are more engaged in your site. They're not falling off. The next thing is where it's okay. So for us, what we typically tell our departments is that when you're introducing the page or when you're introducing a department, and we usually call it our first row, where we usually have a video or we have a description of what the student is, can anticipate from this department. That's where we say this is okay. If you're talking about your mission statement and you're putting it in language that students understand, that's where this would come into play, where you can use those exaggerations in corporate marketing. But at the point where you're looking for, or at the point where you're describing services or different forms, different pieces that the student would actually need, or is something that's part of the registration process, that's where you want to avoid that type of language. The next thing is thinking about using inverted pyramid style when you're building your pages, right? So starting, and we probably all heard this in like a journalism class, but starting at the very top and moving down, always providing the most important information first. What are the things when you look at your analytics that students are actually going to the most on your pages, that they're trying to access the most, and then going down from there. So typically the way that we describe it to our departments is that at the very top, you're wanting to put your high level, very like important links to different services or forms or commonly accessed resources. And then at the bottom would be like your contact information, right? So going from top to bottom in that way. So thinking about it, the average user, when we think about above and below the fold, an old newspaper term, but when we think about when they first get to a page and then begin scrolling down, the difference in the way that users treat it is about 84%, right? So it's really important that we catch their attention once they're at the top. One of the things, though, that we usually get once we say that, though, is that, well, students aren't going to scroll, so we need to shove everything to the top of the page. And that's where I come back and usually say that it doesn't mean that users don't scroll. Users will scroll when they have a reason to visit the bottom of the page, right? So it's again using that inverted pyramid style where the student gets the information that they're probably looking for more at the top, but that it gives them a reason to keep scrolling down to find that other content. That's where it's important. That's where you're going to make a difference in the way that students engage in your site, is by spreading things out, by giving them reason to go down the page, right? Because users will scroll when there's reason to. So the next priority that I find important is being clear, right? And so when we talk about SEO, we talk about how students are searching things, how they're trying to find things. We want to make sure that we're using language that matches the student's language, right? And so the biggest thing is using plain spoken words. And I feel like a lot of the times when you think about students and we think about how we're writing to them, we don't think. And the struggle is that we use a lot of acronyms that we're using in meetings every day with our coworkers or with other employees at the institutions that we work at. Education just happens to have a lot of acronyms or happens to have a lot of words that the students that we are marketing to typically don't use. And so explaining that out, writing that out, and making sure that it's clear and it's in the language that they're using is critical to making sure that your web pages are engaging, right? So one of the things that we like to do, obviously there is a time and place to use the word FAFSA, or the free application for federal student aid. But whenever you're talking about it in a paragraph, just thinking about completing the financial aid application, right? A lot of the times, new students or particularly dual credit students may not know that it's called the FAFSA, or they may have heard it once, but then they hear it in other places where it's just a financial aid application, right? Because some schools combo financial aid and scholarships. And so thinking about that and the way that the student's going to take it and putting that into your content is important, so that when they're searching for it, when they're looking for it, that comes up, and that is something that's highlighted to them, right? Then using the full on language that we use every day, that's a little bit more higher level, right? The other piece is aiming for a 7th to 8th grade reading level, or for users that are about 12 to 14 years old. So the reason that we think about this, is particularly in community colleges, is that the majority of our students that we're reaching typically start looking at colleges at eighth to ninth grade, right? And so we want to make sure that whether they're signing up for dual credit courses or they're thinking about what college they're going to go to post graduation, um, making sure that we're writing everything in a way that makes sense to them where they're at and meeting them where they're at, right? Because when we use that college level language in our in our marketing content, that can be difficult for a student to understand that's at that ninth grade level. And so it's just thinking about where they are and how we can write towards them. Where this comes up, a solution that we found, and I don't know if everyone knows this, but I think this is a really nifty tool. So if you don't, if you are in Word or if you throw anything in Word, you can actually go into file and you can go to proofing, and you can, every time that you run a spell check, you can actually look at readability statistics, and the readability statistics will actually tell you the grade level that you're writing at, right? And so it's a simple tool that'll help you where you can just copy and paste your content. You can into Word and then run a check that way. I know that Grammarly, if you use that, can run a check on your content and ensure that it can tell you where you're writing at, how you're writing. So there's a lot of really nifty tools that can help you when you're writing content and thinking about the level that you're writing at. The next thing is making sure that you keep your content short and then to the point, right? So avoid these big sentences. One example that I have is that typically we have departments that want to write the website in a way, or write content for the website rather, in a way that's like a conversation, right? Like they're literally speaking to the student. And so there's a lot of text, there's a lot of language that is in it that's very fluffy, that's not clear, and it becomes paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of text on pages, and then we're having to work to really bring it down and really pull out what the key information that they're trying to convey is, right? And that can become really challenging for a student. So ensuring that we're not building these huge pages, and we're thinking, keeping everything very short to the point, because that's what students are going to be looking for. Is just, what do I need to do what I need to do, right? Um, so when we think about that, average sentence length, thinking about 14 words, anything readers understand more than 90% of what they're reading when sentences are 14 words or less, right? And so that really becomes a challenge on how we create those shorter sentences and how we're writing our content. But just keeping that in mind is that when we do keep shorter sentences, it's proven that students are going to understand better what we're trying to convey to them. And so finally, the third key priority that I would say is being and making sure that your content is encouraged, right? So what is that next step? What do they need to do? They receive the flyer, now they've been on your website, they're looking for that content, it's clear, it's short, it's built towards the language that they're using. So that next step is, okay, so if I'm trying to schedule a tutoring appointment, what does that look like? What link do I need to click, right? And so when we're using fluffy language on links or on anything else like that, that's really trying to get them to that next step, and it's not clear, or they question it, or it's like, well, is that really sure, like that where I want to go? Then that becomes an issue, right? And so we want to make sure that it's very straightforward and to the point on, this is the next step, click here, do this, right? Uh, so that they can get to whatever we want them to do on that particular page. And so that goes back to our question, right? So we're developing content it's developing content for your pages with intention. And so what do we want students to do on our site? What is that next step, right? What is the link that we need them to get to, or what is that form that we need them to get to? That really needs to be at the core of what building content looks like for your website. Um, and so again, next steps should be easily identified, making sure that students know where they're going. can't stress that enough. And I think that's one of the most difficult things that we have with our departments is that they want to provide all of this content and then the link is way at the bottom, hidden in a corner, and it's not really clear if that's what they need to do, or it's built into a paragraph because they like, where it's linked in a word in a paragraph and that's confusing to the student. It needs to be broken out. And so these are the fights that we go through all the time, or well, discussions that we go through all the time on how students are actually trying to reach that content and how they're trying to get to that next step, right? Um, Web users are typically less committed. Once they get to the website, there's no one standing with them trying to work with them, right? So they have an easy way out. They can just leave and they'll look for it somewhere else. They'll Google it, they'll find it, and then we're losing we're losing that opportunity to connect with that student on our website directly, right? Once they do that. So it's really ensuring that what you want them to do is very clear and encouraged. And then the next thing is limiting the number of options on the page, right? So when we have a specific thing that we want the student to do, if there are 7 things that need to be conveyed in this, sometimes we'll create additional pages, and that can be sometimes counterintuitive to the way that websites work. But when we're looking at specific information and links can go in multiple different ways, we create different descriptions for students, right? Or different pages with different content that really helps them connect. Because once you have a page that has a lot of different paths that the student can take to that next step, it can get confusing and the student can give up, or they can stop, or they'll stop out and they'll leave the page because it becomes overwhelming. And so thinking about that, where simplicity usually wins. We only have so much capacity to process information, and so it's important that we make it clear so that the student doesn't have to put in a lot of effort to find that next step, right? Because um, they won't. And that's what we've found, is that has been the challenge, is that students a lot of the times they want it easy, they want it on the page, and they want to be able to just click it and go. And if they have to read, if they have to go deeper into the page to find what they're looking for, a lot of the times they're going to leave and they're not going to get what they need, and then we lose that opportunity. So that's kind of what I go over with building content. It's making it easy. So making sure that we're employing scannable text, making sure that a student can easily skim your pages, they can find the content that they're looking for, and it's really simple for them to read through it real fast, find what they need, and click on it. Making sure that it's clear. The language that we're using is language that the student understands and can connect with. And then finally, ensuring that it's encouraged, right? So we're limiting the number of options. We're making the options clear for where the student needs to go to take that next step in the path, and that they can make decisions faster once they get to your pages. So that's what I would say will help increase your web engagement. Are there any questions on that? Anything at all?
Cesar,
So
have you? Oh,
somebody
go
was
ahead.
raising
Oh,
their hand.
no,
Um,
I think
that's
Lewis.
that's that's really good stuff. Really good information, Caesar. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I just had to mention that a lot of the things that you're saying have applications in student emails and all types of student communications. Those are really good rules to follow in general, in my opinion. And I just wanted to ask you. We have talked a lot in my department about how many clicks it should take for a student looking for something. Okay, they go to your website. Wh- how many clicks is a good rule?
So at least for us, the way that we've handled it is it depends on the path that the student is taking. But I think for us, what we do is uh, we create pages that we point ads to so that it's fairly quickly that the student's getting the content that they need. And then usually we go 3 levels down, right? So 3 clicks in is where we try to maintain the number of clicks the students are using to get to somewhere on your site. It's not always perfect. That doesn't always work. Obviously, schools are very complicated systems, and so I think it's just making sure. What's more important, at least in my perspective, is ensuring that you're reducing the number of clicks rather than focusing on a specific number, right? Because you're not always going to have this opportunity to make it 3 clicks in the students where they need to be. I think at least with the way that our websites work and the way that college websites work in general, that's a really difficult challenge. And if that's something that colleges can do, I mean, that's amazing. But for us and what I convey to departments is um, don't think so much about the number. Think about how we can reduce the number of clicks that our students are using to get to the content that they need, if that makes sense.
Less is better. Thank you.
No, yeah, absolutely. And funny thing that you say that it is applicable. So I actually got pulled aside. I had a faculty member during convocation reach out, and I actually helped her using these methods to simplify her class structure within our virtual campus and how she presented her class. And making everything consistent, making it very clear like what the next steps are for every lesson that she was teaching. And at the end of the semester, we talked about it, looked at what she had done, and she said that she had actually more engagement from her students. More people were completing their assignments, and less questions she was having to face. And so I do really believe in this method and thinking about it more as intention rather than information on how we're building content. So yeah, yes, I definitely think that this can be applied in a lot of different areas. I just happen to work on websites, so, or at least website content. So that's how it fell there. Yeah. I think Lewis, you had your hand up. I'm not sure if you had a question. Maybe.
It wasn't my hand. It was clapping hands.
Oh, okay. Clapping hands. Sorry. I thought it was a raised hand. I was like, okay, sure.
I just want to say you did a great job. You mentioned imposter syndrome at the beginning, but you did a great job. Not only with the content, because this is all like good stuff that is really good to be reminded about, because it's like there's a lot of this. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Like I need to really think about that. But also the way you laid out the presentation was great. That's it. So clap emoji.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Cesar, as you talk about this with other departments and groups around the college, is this a hard sell for them, or is this more? Do you use this more for internal conversations within marketing?
No, I mean, so when I work, it's okay. Let me think about how I'm going to answer that. When I work with departments, this is actually really interesting because what I've learned, and this is actually a question that came up during the conference, was like a lot of the times, like there's a lot of pushback from departments. What I've learned is building not only relationships but also providing statistics that are um, that you can source, that they can click back to, that they can actually read the articles that you're pulling from, has made a huge difference. And I'm not sure if that applies like outside of our world, but in academia, I guess what I'm finding is that if you can prove what you're saying and you can show someone that this is actual data that's proving that like if we just do this, then this will happen, they usually buy in fairly quickly. And there's less resistance. And so what I've tried to do moving forward on anything that I present to anyone is come back with hard facts from RNL, from Carnegie, from any of the big companies that we have like to pull resources from, and just kind of show that this is a thing. This is what students are showing, like we're seeing in students, and it's not always necessarily specifically pointed towards marketing. Like it's looking at different white papers where it might be directed towards classroom management and how faculty are working, and pulling that information in where they maybe can relate more. So it's also thinking about like who you're speaking to. But no, like it's actually been really fascinating that by just presenting things with sources, I mean, it's has been a lot easier to connect with departments that way. if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's and I think that's a great idea. It's just funny. I had a conversation yesterday where we were using theirs, the contraction, THEY''re, and they're like, should we spell that out? I'm like, well, no, we try to keep it short. We try to keep it simple. They're like, well, in academics, everybody always tells me to spell those out. I'm like, well, we're marketing and we use AP style, and so it's kind of that funny back and forth that we run into sometimes between academic style and AP style. So I think that's a great tip to share your sources.
Yeah. Cool.
Other questions?
I had a question. This is Mary. So we get a lot of requests for redirect links. A lot of people love to have their, little slash friendly link kind of address to put on promotional items and different things. So we just find that they just get bogged down. They bog down the website. What's your take on friendly links, and do you have some advice on how to kind of best achieve that?
You know, Jonathan may have a different perspective. I would maybe, but I think I'd be curious, like what his is. But for us, I think that we've never had an issue with creating vanity URLs or short URLs for departments, especially if we're creating collateral for them that we never want to really put a long URL on a flyer, on an ad that we're pushing out, just because it's easier for students to remember one word versus like a full URL. So when a department requests it, what we typically do or try to do is we have a spreadsheet that we keep every single one that we have, so we try to not create redundancies within short URLs so that we don't have a lot of things pointing to the same place. I think that's important, trying to keep that simple so that we have if it's something that like counseling wants something, but they have a different service, that we're pointing towards the same main page and then having the student click from there. That's kind of like how we organize things. But as far as limiting the number of short URLs that we provide, we've usually, if the department asks for it, that's something that we typically will do for them. But Jonathan, I know that you have a lot more experience than I do. I would wonder like what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I mean, typically we take a similar approach where we'll build short URLs. We try not to build multiple short URLs for the same content because then that ends up getting confusing and so forth. Now, we also have some restrictions in that we typically don't create a short URL for, say, a calendar event or for content that's off of our website unless there's a very specific need. And that's really more of a bandwidth and scalability issue, is that we can't create short URLs for anything and everything that people might dream up. We kind of encourage them to use Bitly or something similar to that. But overall, we create URLs for any content on the website that people are asking for. And we tag it with UTMs, so that helps us as well. So there are some instances, I'll just throw that out there as well, some instances where, say, our text team is pointing to content, and so we create a specific short URL for them so that we can track that it came from our SMS messaging. And it might go on a flyer or it might be a QR code. So we'll put a UTM parameter on there so we have a better idea of who's actually using that specific link.
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought about that. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Luis just gave me the nerd emoji. I tend to get that a lot from my team. I don't know why.
When it comes to redirects, I think for us it was it boils down to management of the redirects. We just said we weren't managing them, and so we had nested redirects. They would jump from one to another it would literally like redirect to the page, and that was slowing down our server time, and that was affecting other things. So I think it narrows down to management. But like for Jonathan and Cesar, like how many are we talking about that y'all would have right now on your books, like on that spreadsheet? Do you have 500, 5,000? Like,
Ooh. I I don't know an exact number off the top of my head. I do know that the spreadsheet does scroll for a minute, so we
okay, all right.
definitely no, we definitely do have a lot. But no, I'm not. I mean, it's a significant number.
You will give me 1 second. I can probably give you our exact number, but as far as short URLs, I think we have around 700. It might actually be more than that now. For long URLs, we're probably around 17 to 1800. Now, one caveat of that, of course, is most of y'all probably know we went from 7 colleges to 1 3 years ago. So we do have a lot of kind of redirects set up for some of those instances where our website's changed, and they're just kind of legacy. But to your point, David, it is definitely the management of making sure that we're not hopping and skipping and jumping multiple times. And luckily, we had someone on our team that was really great at managing all of those spreadsheets when we made the migration. So she was very good at making sure that everything was aligned, making sure we weren't having the multiple skips and so forth. Because, like you said, that will definitely slow down your server when you're going that route.
And then one more question. You can tell that here at Sanjak, redirects are the thing right now because we just launched a brand new website. Are they all server side or all browser side or a mix?
Say that first part again.
Are they all server side? Like, is it part of your htaccess file, or is it
Yes,
within your CMS?
that's how ours is set up.
Okay. All right. And so you don't do any like browser, like browser side, like where you create a page and just the page just says, hey, if somebody comes to this, just jump them over to this site.
We've done that. I can think of maybe 4 or 5 instances over the years where
Okay.
we've done it. It's just it was a weird, unique space. But
Yeah.
our short URLs are all htaccess scripts basically, and then the redirects, it's actually a custom code piece that our team set up where it checks for the URL, and if it lands on a 404, then it will check the redirect list to bump them over to where they need to go. So that's one piece that we have set up. So if I can't leave a page published and set up a redirect for it, it actually has to 404 before it hits the redirect list.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, I was off, David. We're now at 1800 for short URLs and 4700 for long redirects.
Wow.
All right.
I was apparently thinking of when we first launched the site, but we've grown since then.
All right. Good. Oh my gosh.
Well, Cesar, thank you for sharing. This has been great, and we appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And you'll be a resource we can always
For
tap
sure.
into.
And
I know you guys.
love,
Are you're in the middle of a redesign?
we are in the final stages of our redesign. Our launch is set hopefully for the middle of this month. So it's been a roller coaster.
We feel your pain.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm sure.
Definitely reach out, and we need to reach out because I like to share some things that we do, that happened to us just after launch. Just
we launched September 6th, and
we launched September 6th.
good times.
Yeah.
We thought
It's
it
a
was
beautiful
gonna be
site, though.
oh, thank you. We thought we could catch our breath, but yeah, it was kind of the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of anticipating that because I mean we're completely changing our structure, so almost every URL is going to break because everything is changing, and departments seem on board because we've kind of like presented this to them and we've had these meetings where we're like, this is happening, like be aware and all that stuff, and they're like, okay, and I'm like, I don't think you understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not until they can see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, then it's like, oh, now it's real world, and now I've seen these problems, and we need to say this, we should have said that, and we need to talk.
I'm like, turn off the email for that week. You're like, not receiving anything. But yeah, no, we're excited. It'll be an interesting launch.
Definitely
sure.
setting up an intake form, because otherwise we get so many emails and they would just, and things would get lost in your email, all the responses people had. So
Yeah.
you probably
Yeah,
already
that's
have them in place, but just a tip if you don't.
No, absolutely. David and I have actually been talking about that, and one of the things we were looking at was working with our IT department that with their help desk software and where the ticketing software that they use, and kind of like bringing that on for us, so that at least every single request is managed and kept together. And that'll help us organize it, because currently we use Jotform to kind of handle any requests coming in, but it can't keep the responses to specific requests together, and so we were looking for something else. But yeah, no, I feel you. That's something we're like, I'm really nervous about that moment, and I know that y'all went through it. I'm just like, okay, well, tell me what to expect. What's coming?
Yeah, a ticketing system where you can track it is very helpful. So yeah.
Yeah, sweet.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for the great questions and feedback. Cesar, thanks so much for sharing your insights and knowledge with us. We really appreciate that. We'll have the recording up hopefully within the next week or so. So if people need to go back and refer to it, that's great. Also, just want to remind you that our next Lunch and Learn will be coming up in November. I don't have a set date yet, but it'll be on project management and prioritization. So I'm sure that's something that everybody can use some more assistance on. So that'll be coming up in November. And also, too, as a reminder, I don't know that there's anybody on this call necessarily, but if you have not renewed for the 23-24 year for TACCM, be sure that you get that submitted and get that turned in. It really helps with our budgeting, but also helps keep you on the website as well as the listserv and so on and so forth. So I think that's everything. Really appreciate everybody's input. Hope that you got something out of this and walked away with something you can put into practice today in your office. So have a great day, everybody, and a great weekend.
Thank you.